You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
And welcome to another edition of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Stevie J, and I'm the only one you're going to hear from tonight because I am unfortunately bereft of co-hosts. I was expecting to have Peter H. on the show, but he has to work from 4 to 12. I was expecting to have Frank Vaughn, aka Next to Sneaker Pimp, but his flights got screwed up and he's stuck at the Logan International Airport in Boston. So, there's not much I can do but soldier on and talk to you about all the latest news in mixed martial arts and give you a rundown of the results from UFC 213 and the UFC Fight Night, capped off by an excellent fight between Justin Gaethje and Michael Johnson. We're going to get to all of that, but we're going to start with some Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather Jr. news, since as of the recording of this show, they've already held the first of their scheduled press conferences, which are going all around, I was going to say all around the United States, but actually they're going to Canada as well, so they're going all around North America. I can't even say the world, but I imagine they'd go to Singapore, they'd go to Hong Kong if they had the budget and the time. They'd go everywhere because they want to make this the biggest pay-per-view of all time. And of course, you can't be the biggest if you don't have the biggest press conferences and have the fighters run their mouths like the biggest stars that they are. Floyd Mayweather has already been running his mouth because of the fact that he was accused of owing the IRS some back taxes. He put a bunch of pictures on Instagram showing financial amounts that were allegedly treasury checks that he wrote and mailed. And it looks like there was about $26 million if those are authentic pictures of authentic checks that he sent off. I guess he would have the canceled checks back. A lot of people don't even get canceled checks back in the mail these days. I know I don't. But then again, maybe if you're mailing checks for $1 million and $24 million, you would keep those canceled checks. You would ask for them back just so you'd have proof that you gave them that much money, because that's what Floyd Mayweather is all about right now, proving he is Money Mayweather. This is what he said on Instagram. I will just quote it to you. Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, especially when it comes to media in this country. Now let me stop right there and say, what is he? POTUS 45? Anyway, let me continue. While everyone is counting my money and assuming the worst, these are the facts. Uncle Sam received $26 million from me in 2015. What else could they possibly want? I'm sure I would have been notified much sooner if there were any real discrepancies, right? Bottom line, everybody just wants to be a part of the Money May show, including the IRS. That's fine. You can crunch numbers all day, but in the end, my empire is rock solid and intact. Now calculate that. Well, there's much more calculating to be going on because money came up again in the first press conference in Los Angeles, and Conor McGregor couldn't resist mocking Mayweather for his tax troubles, and he did so by flashing an uncashed check for $100 million. Again, I feel like with all these amounts being thrown around, a lot of this is just for show. Why would he just carry around a $100 million check? Why would that not be in the bank earning interest? Why would that not be invested? Why would he just have that kind of amount in his pocket in a check? That doesn't even seem like a secure way to financially transact large amounts of money. You would want to do that bank to bank, wire to wire, whatever. So they're putting on a show here by showing all these checks to people. You should know that's what it is. It's like being handed an oversized novelty check when you win the lottery. That's for show, people. That's to make a show out of it. But here's what Conor had to say as he flashed this check at Floyd Mayweather at the press conference. He's in a effing tracksuit. He can't even afford a suit anymore. His rolls outside is 2012. Mayweather didn't take that. He fired right back. He said, I'm the IRS, and I'm gonna tax your ass. We knew I was the A side since my name is first. And we knew I was the A side. That's why this bitch had to come to the boxing ring. Okay, well, this is what you would expect between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. They're going to talk smack to each other. That's the way it works. So we got a few more days of this coming up this week. I'm sure it will be colorful. I'm sure you'll want to stay tuned to websites like MMA Fighting and MMA Mania for complete coverage of all the antics between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. But let's get into some other news. Fabricio Verdum is appealing his loss at UFC 213. I know we said we'd get into the results, so this might be a good segue to that, because he believes he should not have lost by majority decision. He's appealing to the Nevada State Athletic Commission to overturn the result, and that would just lead to a fourth fight between the two if it happens. Verdum's issue is that he was scored for the third round, which he should have been for knocking down Overeem in that round, but was not scored as the winner of rounds 1 and 2, and he believes that he won one of those rounds. So I guess that's the controversy here, and it was one judge giving it a draw, the other two giving it to Overeem, so it doesn't seem like any judge had him winning that fight no matter what he says. He could have gotten a draw if 2 out of 3 judges had scored it his way, but I don't think he has much of a case, and results very rarely get overturned anyway. But let's just go ahead and talk about the rest of the results from UFC 213, the marquee show of International Fight Weekend, although I would argue the marquee fight took place the night before. The main event was not what we previewed last week. We talked about Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes, but Nunes fell ill before the fight took place, and even though she was medically cleared before the fight, her teammates insisted that she should not take the fight. Amanda Nunes took their advice and decided, well, I'm just not well enough because I've only just gotten medically cleared. That's not enough time for me to be ready, so I'm not taking the fight, which has stirred up a hornet's nest of controversy, and Frank really wanted to talk about it on the show this week. That's why he was invited on Glove Up or Shut Up, but we'll have to catch him another time. I don't know how you want to see it. It depends on your point of view. If she really was sick as a dog and not feeling well enough, even though she was medically cleared, you can't blame a fighter for not taking a fight in that condition. If, on the other hand, she had recovered well before the fight was scheduled to take place, was medically cleared on fight day, and then just decided not to fight, well, that's a little suspect. But I'm not the fighter. I'm not the doctor. I can't say anything other than what we read, what we hear. All I can tell you is it's created a lot of talk about whether she should have been forced to forfeit the title since she was medically cleared to fight and did not fight. But regardless, they still had a co-main event, and they moved that up to the main event. That was Yoel Romero, the Soldier of God, and Robert Whittaker competing for the interim middleweight title, since Michael Bisping was not available to defend the middleweight title. And in the interim match, the first ever fighter from Australia to capture a UFC world title is Robert Whittaker. Even though I think Romero was probably expected by some, if not many, to go into the fight and capture the interim title, given the absolute wrecking machine he had been on the entire middleweight division up to this point, you gotta take your hat off to Robert Whittaker, because he had quietly been doing the same thing, going from Mike Rhodes in 2014 to Jacare Souza just a few months ago, and capped off his win streak by capturing the interim title, which puts him immediately in line to challenge Michael Bisping for the middleweight title and unify the two belts. So, hats off to Robert Whittaker for outlasting Yoel Romero in a very competitive fight. It was 48-47 across the board, and who knows? Romero, with that kind of performance, lasting the full 5 rounds and just coming up short, he's still in the mix. It's not like he's going to drop all the way out of title contention. He can probably face the winner of Bisping and Whittaker, especially if he gets another win right away after this fight. He's very much in the hunt. We already talked about Overeem and Verdum. I don't think it's controversial. I don't think it's getting overturned. I think Overeem won fair and square here, even though he got knocked down in the 3rd round. So I really don't have more to add to that result. Curtis Blades and Daniel Omelnichuk. This was also a unanimous decision. We had a lot of these on the main card, aside from the one fight that got bonused onto the main card to take the place of Nunes and Shevchenko not taking place. But anyway, Curtis Blaydes won this by unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Same goes for a lightweight fight between Anthony Showtime Pettis, the former champion, but not been looking like a champion in several of his recent fights. So this was a comeback performance for him. And they gave him an opponent which he's capable of beating in Jim Miller, but only capable of beating because of the fact that this is no longer the peak of Miller's career. Unfortunately, I've been saying he's nearing retirement for a while now. He went on a little bit of a streak there with 3-fight win streak against Takanori Gomi, Joe Lozon, and Thiago Alves. But now things have gone back the other direction for him with losses to Dustin Poirier and a loss to Anthony Pettis here by unanimous decision. But Pettis desperately needed this win to get back on track because up to this point, up to beating Jim Miller, he had lost 4 out of his last 5 fights to Rafael Dos Anjos, Eddie Alvarez, Edson Barboza, and Max Holloway. So very much a needed win in his return to lightweight and hopefully his return to relevance in UFC. But Jim Miller is always going to be relevant just because he's been around forever and has had some of the most fun and exciting fights ever in UFC history. So you can't take nothing away from him, even if he's no longer looking like the premier fighter, the elite fighter that he once used to be. Everybody's got their time, and Jim Miller's time, it may not be over yet. I mean, he's only 33. He could still bounce back, but he's no longer the elite of the lightweight division. The bonus fight that got moved up onto the pay-per-view card was a bantamweight bout between Rob Font and Douglas Silva de Andrade, and Rob Font won by guillotine choke 4 minutes 36 seconds into the second round. So that was your only finish on the main card of UFC 213. The preliminary card had a little bit more excitement, so if you didn't buy the pay-per-view and only tuned in for Fox Sports 1, you actually got to see some pretty fun stuff. You got to see Alexei Oleinik and Travis Brown, and this one ended with a rear naked choke at 3:44 in the second round. Travis Brown kind of looked shot at this point. It's not been going well for him. He had a few moments in the first round where it looked like he was going to overwhelm Oleinik, but then Oleinik fired back up and was able to hurt his opponent as badly as he'd been hurt. And in the second round, Brown just was completely out of gas, and when it went to the ground, he was vulnerable to a submission right away. It's 4 straight losses now for Brown. He really needs to get something figured out here in a hurry, or he may be moving on to Bellator or Premier Fighters, He may be moving on to Bellator or the Professional Fighters League. It may not last much longer for him in UFC at this rate, because that's Cain Velasquez, Fabricio, Derek Lewis, and now Alexei Oleinik with the biggest win of his UFC career. I wouldn't call it biggest win of his career, because Alexei's had well over 50 fights. This guy has been fighting forever. And actually, he cut one of the best babyface promos of the entire show afterward, dedicating the fight to his wife and his 4 children back home in Russia. So, again, what can you say? Alexei Oleinik, I don't know if he's ever going to be a super-duper star, but he's a star with me after that. Chad Laprise, the former winner of Tough Nations, the Australia versus Canada season, which is very fitting given that we had an Australian win the middleweight title here, or interim middleweight title. He beat Brian Camozzi by TKO a minute and 27 seconds into the third round of a welterweight bout. A very fun fight. I would encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. Find a replay or wait till it shows up on UFC Fight Pass in the archives. It was a very solid performance for Laprise, and Brian Camozzi, not going well for him. Just being the brother of Chris Camozzi is not paying the bills for him here, because he's dropped both of his fights in UFC so far. If he gets a third one, he really needs to win that, or he's dropping to 7-5, and he's probably dropping right out of the promotion. So he's on the fence right now. Thiago Santos beat Gerald Mischart, I'm not quite remembering how they pronounced it on the live broadcast, which, whatever. I really expected him to do better here against Thiago Santos, but he got absolutely creamed in the second round of this middleweight fight and finished at 204. So that was our third finish of the preliminary card and puts Thiago Santos back in the driver's seat in the middleweight division with 2 straight wins. Picks up a third. He could really gain some upward momentum, move into the rankings and start contending with some of those upper guys in the division. Probably not the likes of Jacare or Romero anytime soon, but he'd be on the right path and he'd be getting back to relevance because he had a 4-fight win streak going up till 2016 and then lost back-to-back fights to Gegard Mousasi and Eric Spicely, which put him on the back burners. So this was a good win for Santos to regain his momentum. And speaking of momentum, remember the name Belal Muhammad, somebody you've heard me interview before on YouTube. If you go into the youtube.com/AngryMarks.com archives, you can find a Belal Muhammad interview there. Well, he beat Jordan Mein by unanimous decision, 29-28 times 2 and 30-27. And I really only thought Jordan Mein looked good in one round. Most of the time, he just seemed to be getting outworked by Belal. He was just hungrier and faster, especially rounds 2 and 3. First round, Jordan was using his reach and his length to keep Belal at distance and fire kicks, but then Belal just mauled him and took him down and outworked him in the second and third rounds. So I think the judges scoring at 29-28 got it right. I was surprised one gave all 3 rounds to Belal, but still, the right man won here. So, a decision, but a little more exciting than some of the decisions on the main card. I thought Belal turned in a very energetic performance, really established himself well in those second and third rounds, and showed that he's a fighter that doesn't fade after a tough first round. He actually comes back and performs better. And that gives him 3 wins in his last 4 fights. So even though he started off his UFC career with a loss to Alan Jaban, he's moving in the right direction now. He could be somebody to watch out for at welterweight. So as his nickname suggests, remember the name. At featherweight, Cody Stamann beat Terrion Ware by unanimous decision on the UFC Fight Pass card. And there was only one other UFC Fight Pass fight because Font and Andrade got moved up. That was Trevin Giles and James Bogdanovic. And Bogdanovic got knocked out at 2 minutes 54 seconds of the second round. Trevin Giles, in his UFC debut, picks up a win. I believe they said he went up to light heavyweight for this fight because it was short notice. So we may actually see him in the middleweight division from this point on. But given he was successful in his debut, who knows? And for Bogdanovic, this has got to be hugely disappointing. He was a highly touted guy coming in from the Ben Rothwell camp. They had nothing but great things to say about him, and he got clobbered here. But maybe he gets another fight on a UFC Fight Pass prelim. It may just help that he's connected to Ben Rothwell. That may be all it takes. So we'll see if he can benefit from that arrangement going forward and get another fight. But he didn't get the win here in his debut. That went to Giles. The other card of the weekend was, as noted, headlined by the fight of the weekend. Michael Johnson and Justin Gaethje, the former World Series of Fighting lightweight champion, undefeated in his mixed martial arts career, going against the number 5 ranked lightweight, but not ranked so highly anymore because Justin Gaethje knocked him out at 4:48 of the second round. This was, in the words of good old JR, a slobber knocker. This was not your super technical fight. This was 2 guys hammering each other as hard as they could right in the pocket. And Gaethje, as you've seen in quite a few of his fights, if you've watched World Series of Fighting, he got his bell rung. But even in getting his bell rung, he was able to weather the storm and recover and eventually fire back with even harder shots. And the man who eventually faded was Johnson, not Gaethje. Now, if he tries that with anybody above him at lightweight, now that he's ranked in the lightweight division, that's going to be problematic. I mean, he got damn close to getting finished. Just like in World Series of Fighting, he got damn close to getting finished several times. Just look at that fight with Luis Palomino, the second one, and tell me you didn't see him get severely rocked in that fight and still come back to turn in an awesome performance. It's kind of the hallmark of Justin Gaethje's career. Well, he sure left a memorable impression on UFC fans who had never seen him before, so you gotta say it's a successful debut, and it puts him right away in the mix at number 6 at lightweight, and slides Michael Johnson 4 spots down to number 9. But just think about him trying that exact same strategy with the boxer the likes of Eddie Alvarez, the striker the likes of El Kakui, or the wrestler the likes of Habib. I don't know. I'd love to see him work his way all the way up to Conor McGregor. If we can ever get him back from the McGregor-Mayweather thing, which is questionable at this point, whether he's ever going to come back to defend his lightweight title. But can you imagine how much fun that would be, Justin Gaethje and Conor McGregor? That would be off the hook. But first he has to work his way up to that. And secondly, he's really got to consider this I'll take a punch to give a punch style, because I don't think you want to do that with Tony or Eddie, and Habib's just going to take you to the ground and not even play that game. So it all depends on who he gets matched up with going forward. But there's definitely some intriguing prospects ahead for the undefeated and now ranked Justin Gaethje. In the finale of Tough Redemption, Jesse Taylor beat Diego Lima by rear naked choke 43 seconds into the second round. And for Diego, that's heartbreaking, because this is the second time on a season of Tough that he's come up short at the very end. For Jesse Taylor, this literally is redemption, because he's the guy who got kicked off Ultimate Fighter when he went out partying, when he was supposed to be preparing for getting his UFC contract, and started acting like he was already a UFC fighter, and got drunk and kicked out the window of a limo that he had taken for the night with some other fighters, and was scaring people in the casino he went into because he was so drunk and full of piss and vinegar about how he was already a UFC fighter and a huge star. And Dana kicked him off the show. Dana kicked him out of UFC. I think at one point Dana even said, this guy will never be back here ever again. But after that, Jesse Taylor went on to have a successful fighting career pretty much everywhere in the world you could go. Like, any promotion you could go to, he had 1 or 2 fights there, and did well for the most part. His overall record coming into the Tough finale, 30-15. So he had won twice as many fights as he had lost. Not every fight would go his way. You know, he'd win 2, he'd lose 2, he'd win 2, he'd lose 2, but he was definitely earning a living and doing well outside of UFC, and now finally gets to come full circle after he probably should have gone on to win the very first time he was in the Ultimate Fighter, but it just was not meant to be back then, because he got into trouble, got removed from the finale, and now he's really redeemed himself. He's come all the way from the 7th season of The Ultimate Fighter to being around the world and back again, to coming back for the 25th season for Tough Redemption, and he wins the whole thing. So you just got to hand it to him. Congratulations to Jesse Taylor. He's now a father, he's a responsible man, and he's proven himself on the biggest stage of all. Dana seemed really pleased that Jesse Taylor had proven the name of the show correct by redeeming himself in the finale. You could not have seen 2 happier men. In fact, a lot of what went on had to be bleeped out because he was so happy he was just dropping F-bombs all over the place. But okay, even if he's not drunk, let's just give him that one, because he just won a freaking season of The Ultimate Fighter. In fact, in his entire time on The Ultimate Fighter, between 2 different seasons, he never lost a fight. 7-0 the whole freaking time. So, once again, your 2 feel-good stories of the weekend don't even come out of UFC 213. They come out of this card. They come out of Gaethje beating Michael Johnson in his UFC debut and Jesse Taylor redeeming himself in the tough finale. Other fights on the Ultimate Fighter finale card are as follows. Jakar Close beat Mark DeCase by split decision. 2 judges gave him a 29-28. 1 gave it to his opponent. At light heavyweight, Jared Cannonier beat Nick Rory by TKO 2:08 of the 3rd round. In a middleweight bout, Brad Tavares beat Elias Teodoro by unanimous decision, all 3 judges scoring at 29-28. I think that's the right call. Kind of sad to see Elias Teodoro come up short. He's another one of those guys from Tough Nations. I would expect more of him, but he's also got those GQ looks, so he's really not hurting for it if he doesn't win his fights, because he still does his modeling and his acting, so getting paid no matter whether it's in the octagon or not. At light heavyweight, Jordan Johnson beat Marcel Fortuna, also 29-28 across the board. Have very little memory of this fight, to be honest with you. I think I came home late, might not have even seen that one. I definitely missed the preliminary card, so I'm just going to read you these results, but there's only one fight here I really wish I had seen. You'll know in a second. Angela Hill beat Ashley Yoder 30-27 across the board at strawweight. James Krause beat Tom Galicchio 30-27 across the board at welterweight. C.B. Dalloway beat Ed Herman by unanimous decision. 2 judges gave it 29-27, 1 gave it 29-28. I think there must have been a 1-point deduction in there for those scores. And the one I really wish I had seen, Tisha Torres and Juliana Lima. And Torres won it by a rear naked choke 53 seconds into the 2nd round. Gray Maynard beat Teruto Ishihara in the UFC Fight Pass fight by 30-26 across the board. So at least one of those rounds was a 10-8 in his favor. So I guess Gray Maynard isn't done quite yet. Good to see him get a little bit back on track. As for bonuses from these cards, the $50,000 fight of the night went to Gaethje and Johnson. Performance of the night bonuses went to Gaethje and Tisha Torres. So Gaethje got an extra $100,000 for his efforts on the evening. And at UFC 213, the bonuses for fight of the night went to Whittaker and Romero, $50,000 each. Performance of the night went to Rob Font and Chad Laprise, so they each pocket an additional $50,000. Now, we've got a Bellator card coming up this weekend, but there's been a little bit of a change to it. We will not be seeing Valerie Letourneau. She has withdrawn from the card due to an undisclosed injury, so stepping in to take her place on the main card in Thackerville, Oklahoma at the WinStar Resort and Casino is Jessica Middleton. So the 2-1 Middleton will be taking on the 5-2 Emily Ducote, and I favor Ducote in this fight because I've really not seen a whole lot out of Middleton. Both of the fights that she's won in Bellator were by decision. Then she got completely manhandled by Alimale McFarlane, who coincidentally is also the only person to beat Emily Ducote. But Ducote has won 3 out of her last 4 fights by submission. So if you're looking for a winner in that fight, I would go with Ducote. That's my personal pick. That's my advice to you. But watch the fights on Friday night to see what happens between Middleton and Ducote. But that's not all we have on tap for Bellator 181. We have the 3rd fight in a trilogy between Derek Campos and Brandon Gertz in the main event. And the last fight between the two of them, Gertz won in just 37 seconds of the first round via knockout. So if the 3rd fight is anything like the 2nd fight, then Gertz will take the lead in the trilogy and probably end the series 2-1 overall. But if it's anything like the 1st fight, Campos will use size and reach and just control it and maybe even work him to the ground and manhandle him there. So it could go either way, and that's why we watch the fights, right? But my prediction is going to be that in the trilogy fight, it's going to go the way of Derek Campos via unanimous. It's going to go the way of Derek Campos via unanimous decision, provided he makes the weight and comes in at his full strength. As for the other two fights on the main card, we have Joe Warren taking on Steve Garcia at bantamweight in a very familiar venue for Warren. He fights in Thackerville almost every card, it seems. I wish I could say I 100% believe that Joe Warren is going to win this fight, but he is 40 now, and he's got to be losing a little bit of quickness on his step. And Steve Garcia is 25, 7-1, young and hungry. Exactly the kind of guy to take advantage of it, but never count Joe Warren out in a fight because he's got that world medal level wrestling ability. He's been a great Greco-Roman wrestler for so many decades now. He's won in competitions all around the world, long before his mixed martial arts career began. So all he'd have to do is just keep taking down Garcia over and over again. But who knows? Garcia is way taller than him. He's a George Roop-sized bantamweight. He's 6 foot, so that's a tall order to deal with figuratively and literally, which is why I'm not going to pick Joe Warren to win. But you know what? I like Joe Warren so much, I'll be happy to be wrong about that. Our other main card fight is Kendall the Spider Grove against John Salter. And John Salter already has a win over the former middleweight champion Brandon Halsey, and he's just been a monster smashing his way through competition in the middleweight division of late. So I hate to say it for Kendall Grove, but unless he really uses that length of his to his advantage, or he manages to get Salter into a bad position on the ground and submit him, then I think John Salter is winning this fight. But John Salter is no slouch in the submission department either, which is why I don't think Kendall Grove has the automatic advantage, despite being well regarded as a jiu-jitsu ace ever since he won the Ultimate Fighter way back in the day. I just don't know if that's enough against Salter on the ground, because I've seen Salter make people's eyes pop. I mean, he's just wicked on the ground. You do not want to get that man's arm under your chin. So that's Bellator 181. We've talked about Ultimate Fighter Redemption. We've talked about UFC 213. We've talked about Conor McGregor and Floyd Money Mayweather. And I think that's going to do it for the show this week. My name is Stevie J. Thank you for listening to Glove Up or Shut Up. And as my co-host Peter would say if he was here tonight, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everyone.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.